In our examination of the moral decline prevalent in pre-Islamic Arabia, often termed the Age of Ignorance or Jahiliyyah, a crucial question arises: why did Allah choose Arabia and its people as the setting for the final prophet? Why not a more advanced civilization, such as the Romans or Persians, known for their sophisticated cultures and governance? Why was the Arabian Peninsula, characterized by its nomadic tribes and lack of structured governance, selected as the birthplace of the final revelation? Several factors can be considered in understanding this divine choice. Firstly, Arabia was strategically located between two major superpowers of the era, the Byzantine Empire and the Sasanian Empire. This geographic positioning enabled a unique blend of cultural influences and facilitated the rapid spread of Islam. Despite its central location, Arabia remained distinct and uncolonized, free from the imperialistic ambitions that defined the neighboring empires. Remarkably, within a few decades, the Arabian Peninsula emerged as the center of a new empire that quickly subdued these two formidable powers, marking a significant shift in the region's geopolitical landscape. Additionally, the Arabs had no significant history of imperialism or external conquests before Islam. This lack of a colonial legacy meant that the early Muslims were often underestimated and not perceived as a credible threat by the established powers. This underestimation enabled the Muslim armies to achieve swift and unexpected victories against the Byzantines and Sasanians. Another key factor is the absence of a cohesive civilization in pre-Islamic Arabia. Unlike the Romans or Persians, who had well-established legal systems, literature, and architectural achievements, the Arabs lacked a unified government and a centralized cultural identity. Their societal structure was primarily based on tribal affiliations, and their literary tradition was largely oral, centered on poetry. This lack of a unified political or cultural structure provided a unique opportunity for Islam to introduce a comprehensive societal transformation without facing significant resistance from entrenched systems. The arrival of Islam provided the Arabs with a unifying framework, transforming them from a collection of disparate tribes into a leading civilization. The Quran itself acknowledges this transformation, noting that before the advent of Islam, the Arabs had no significant legacy. It was through the teachings of the Quran that they gained a lasting and respected heritage. Thus, the selection of Arabia for the final revelation was a choice imbued with profound wisdom. It offered an environment where a new religious and cultural order could develop unimpeded by the existing structures of older civilizations. The unity and transformation brought about by Islam were unprecedented, establishing the Arabs as a significant force in history and shaping not only the Arabian Peninsula but the entire world. Before the advent of Prophet Mohammed, peace be upon him, the Arab tribes had never experienced a unified political or cultural identity. This disunity was transformed under his leadership, which united the descendants of Ishmael into a single, cohesive community. The absence of a prior unified civilization among the Arabs, often perceived as a drawback, was, in fact, a strategic advantage. This would allow Islam to establish a unique and comprehensive civilization, characterized by its distinct language, literature, script, coinage, and architectural styles. The development of such a civilization was facilitated by the absence of an entrenched cultural heritage, providing a clean slate upon which the new Islamic identity could be built. The selection of Arabia as the birthplace of Islam was also influenced by its geopolitical insignificance at the time. The region was not considered a significant threat by the contemporary superpowers, the Byzantines and the Sassanids, who viewed the internal conflicts and perceived backwardness of the Arab tribes with contempt. The rise of a political force from such an unexpected quarter was analogous to a modern prediction that a currently underdeveloped country might suddenly emerge as a global superpower. This unexpected geopolitical positioning allowed the nascent Muslim community to develop without immediate external pressures. Mecca's significance as the cradle of Islam is deeply rooted in its history as the site of the first house built for the worship of Allah, established by Prophet Ibrahim. This symbolic choice underscored Islam's universality, in contrast to previous revelations, which were localized and directed towards specific communities. The universality of Islam, intended for all of humanity, is reflected in its origins in Mecca, a city historically associated with the monotheistic worship established by Ibrahim. Despite the lack of certain civilizational attributes, the Arab people possessed qualities that made them particularly receptive to the message of Islam. Their purity of spirit, untainted by complex philosophical doctrines or rigid cultural structures, made them more open to new ideas and truths. This characteristic of simplicity often aligns with sincerity, explaining why many of the early converts to Islam were individuals known for their straightforwardness and integrity. The Arabs' accustomedness to a harsh and austere lifestyle provided a strategic advantage during the early Islamic conquests. Unlike the well-equipped and organized forces of the Romans and Persians, the Arab armies were characterized by their resilience and ability to endure prolonged hardships with minimal resources. This adaptability was crucial in the rapid expansion of the Islamic State. The cultural traits of the Arabs, particularly their valor and honesty, were instrumental in the early successes of Islam. The courage demonstrated in battle and the emphasis on truthfulness were essential in spreading the message of Islam. While pride can manifest in both positive and negative ways, the Arabs' pride in their newfound Islamic identity provided a powerful motivational force that supported the spread and establishment of the new faith. In a well-documented encounter between Abu Sufyan and Heraclius, the Emperor of Rome, we gain insight into the moral fabric of Prophet Arab society. Heraclius, aware of Abu Sufyan's opposition to the Prophet Mohammed, sought to verify the truthfulness of his responses. He placed Abu Sufyan's caravan members behind him, instructing them to signal if Abu Sufyan lied. Despite his pagan beliefs and opposition to the Prophet, Abu Sufyan refrained from fabricating falsehoods. He later admitted that his fear of being labeled a liar by his peers was the primary reason for his honesty, illustrating the high value placed on truthfulness in Arab culture. The Arabs of that era were also renowned for their steadfast commitment to their oaths. A notable example is Abdul-Muttalib, who felt a strong obligation to fulfill a vow made to Allah, even without external pressure. This sense of honor was such that verbal agreements were considered binding, without the need for written contracts or witnesses. Treachery was viewed as a serious moral failing. Arab society was also distinguished by its exceptional equestrian skills. Renowned for both their horses and horsemanship, they were unmatched by the Romans and Persians. Arabian horses, praised in hadith, are still highly regarded today. The Prophet Muhammad himself extolled the virtues of these horses, attributing a special blessing to them. Furthermore, the Arabic language's richness and complexity contributed to the unique cultural identity of the Arabs. As a Semitic language, Arabic is known for its expressive and nuanced vocabulary. Its linguistic structure allows for extensive derivation from root words, enabling the formation of hundreds of related terms. This feature, shared with other Semitic languages such as Hebrew and Aramaic, is often cited as a hallmark of their eloquence and depth. These cultural and linguistic attributes not only shaped the pre-Islamic Arab world but also provided a fertile ground for the spread of Islam. The combination of moral integrity, martial prowess, and linguistic sophistication created a unique context in which Islam could take root and flourish. One of the primary reasons why Allah chose the Arabs was due to the supplication made by the Prophet Abraham. While constructing the Kaaba with his son Ismail, Ibrahim prayed, "O our Lord, raise among them a messenger who will recite to them your verses, teach them the book and wisdom, and purify them." This prayer was a request for a prophet to arise from his progeny through Ismail, who would guide and purify the people. It is known from Islamic tradition and the Quran that Ibrahim was informed about the prophets who would descend from his other son, Ishaq, Isaac. These prophets, including the Israelite prophets, came from Ishaq's lineage. However, it was also foretold that a prophet would come from the descendants of Ismail. From the time of Ibrahim until the Prophet Muhammad, all prophets came from the lineage of Ishaq, except for Muhammad, who was from the lineage of Ismail. The Prophet Muhammad highlighted this distinction, stating, "I am the response to my father Ibrahim's prayer and the glad tidings foretold by Jesus." The Prophet Muhammad's lineage was considered the most noble among the Arabs. He belonged to the tribe of Quraysh, chosen from the descendants of Kinana, who were selected from the descendants of Ismail. The Prophet Muhammad emphasized the honor and distinction of his family line, stating that he was from the most noble lineage. Regarding the Prophet's immediate family, particularly his parents Abdullah and Amina, historical records are sparse. Both parents passed away at a young age, in their early 20s, and there was limited documentation of their lives. At the time of their deaths, it was not yet known that their son would become a prophet, so there was no specific effort to document their lives. Moreover, by the time the Prophet Muhammad began his prophetic mission, many years had passed since his parents' deaths, and few people remained who could provide detailed accounts about them. This lack of information about the Prophet's parents reflects the broader historical context and societal norms of the time. Despite this, the noble lineage of the Prophet Muhammad and the significance of his birth and mission are well recorded and emphasized in Islamic tradition. As Islam gained stability and prominence, the recollection of its early days became more prominent. However, by the time Islam reached a position of power, there were few left who could recall those early periods. This is an important context when considering the available records of the Prophet Muhammad's life. The Meccan period, which spanned 53 years, 40 years before prophethood and 13 years after, compared to the 10 years of the Medinan period, is less documented. If we were to compile the chronicles of these periods, the accounts from Medina would be far more extensive, despite covering a shorter time frame. This is because, during periods of stability and peace, there is greater capacity to document events, unlike during times of persecution, such as when early Muslims faced severe trials and tribulations. Given this context, the scarcity of information about the Prophet's parents, Abdullah and Amina, is understandable. They lived short lives and passed away before the Prophet's mission began, so there was no particular attention given to their life stories. By the time the Prophet's significance became apparent, many who might have remembered his parents had already passed away. Abdullah, the Prophet's father, was nearly sacrificed by his father, Abdul-Muttalib, as part of a vow. After being spared, Abdul-Muttalib sought a bride for Abdullah. According to some reports, Abdullah was around 18 years old, while others suggest he was in his early 20s. Abdul-Muttalib arranged a marriage between Abdullah and Amina, the daughter of Wahb, the chief of the Banu Zura tribe. The Banu Zura was a notable subtribe within the larger Quraysh tribe, which also included the Banu Hashim, the Prophet's lineage. The marriage took place shortly before the caravan season when traders would journey to Syria. Abdullah and Amina spent only a few days together before Abdullah departed with the caravan, a journey from which he would not return. Their marriage was thus tragically brief. There are various legends and anecdotes surrounding Abdullah, including claims of a special light, nur, on his face, which supposedly attracted the attention of many young women in Quraysh. These women are said to have lost interest in Abdullah after his marriage to Amina, attributing this change to the loss of the nur, which some suggest symbolized the forthcoming birth of the Prophet Muhammad. While these stories are not authenticated and should be approached with caution, they reflect the reverence and mystique surrounding the Prophet's lineage. In discussing such narratives, it is important to distinguish between fact and embellishment. The science of hadith and historical transmission in Islam emphasizes the importance of verifying the authenticity of stories. Nevertheless, some non-authentic accounts are recounted because they do not contradict established beliefs or ethical norms. In the case of Abdullah and Amina, much of what is known is based on tradition rather than verifiable history. Less than a week after their marriage, Abdullah had only a brief time with Amina before he departed to join a caravan heading to Syria. On the return journey, Abdullah fell seriously ill, which caused significant delays for the caravan. Upon reaching a location that would later become known as Medina, Abdullah decided to stay with his relatives there to recover, asking the caravan to return to Mecca without him. Remarkably, Abdullah had relatives in Medina, a rare occurrence given that the Quraysh tribe typically married within their own group. This connection was significant because it would later influence the Prophet Muhammad's own life. As a child, Muhammad would visit Medina with his mother, establishing an early link between the city and his family. Abdullah's stay in Medina was intended to be temporary, but by the time the caravan returned to Mecca, Amina was eagerly anticipating his return. She was dismayed to learn that Abdullah was not with the caravan. It is likely that Abdullah was unaware of Amina's pregnancy, given that he had been with her for only a few days. Amina initially received word that Abdullah was ill and would return after he recovered. However, she soon learned that Abdullah had passed away a few weeks later, at a young age, between 20 and 22 years old. His final resting place in Medina remains unknown. As a result, Amina became a widow at a very young age, possibly as young as 18 or 19, while pregnant with Abdullah's child. The Prophet Muhammad was born during the notable year of the elephant, which leads us to examine the specifics of his birth date. The commonly accepted date of the Prophet's birth is the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal. However, early historical sources present various dates, and there is no unanimous agreement on the precise date. According to a well-known hadith reported in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet Muhammad mentioned that he fasted on Mondays because it was the day he was born and the day when revelation began. This confirms that his birth occurred on a Monday. The reference to the year of the elephant provides context for the time frame of his birth. Another narration suggests that the Prophet and a companion were born in the same year, supporting the widely accepted belief that he was born in the year of the elephant. Although some sources suggest that the Prophet was born 10, 15, or even 20 years earlier or later, these views are considered minor outliers. The prevailing consensus among early historians is that he was born in the year of the elephant. As previously noted, the pre-Islamic Arabs did not have a standardized calendar. Instead, they dated years based on significant events, such as the year of the drought, the year of the invasion, and the year of the elephant. This system involved referring to years relative to these notable events until a new significant event provided a new reference point. It was only with the advent of Islam that a formal calendar system, the Islamic Hijri calendar, was established and is still used today. We can affirm two key details: the Prophet was born in the year of the elephant and on a Monday. Determining the precise year of the elephant is challenging due to the lack of detailed records from many sources. However, synthesizing various historical indicators suggests that the Prophet was born around 570 CE. Regarding the exact date of his birth, historical accounts vary. Ibn Ishaq, a prominent historian who died in 150 Hijri, reports that the Prophet was born on a Monday, the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal, in the year of the elephant. While this account is widely referenced, Ibn Ishaq wrote approximately 200 years after the Prophet's birth and did not provide a detailed chain of narrators to support his claim. Another early historian, al-Tabari, who wrote around 220 Hijri, mentions that the Prophet was born on a Monday, with some sources suggesting the 10th or 2nd of Rabi al-Awwal. These dates differ from Ibn Ishaq's account. Al-Baladuri, another notable early historian, also observed that there were varying opinions regarding the birth date, with some scholars affirming the 2nd of Rabi al-Awwal. This view was supported by early scholars such as Abu Salama, d. 171 Hijri, and al-Dahabi, d. 463 Hijri. Additional opinions include the 8th of Rabi al-Awwal, attributed to scholars like Imam Malik and al-Muhallab, d. 128 Hijri, and the 10th of Rabi al-Awwal, which is also supported by some descendants of the Prophet, such as Jafar al-Sadiq, a notable Shia imam. The 12th of Rabi al-Awwal remains the most widely accepted date, as noted by Ibn Kathir, despite the lack of a clear chain of narrators to verify this date. Other suggested dates include the 17th and 22nd of Rabi al-Awwal, as well as claims that the Prophet was born in Ramadan, according to Zubakr, an early historian who wrote about Mecca. Despite various opinions suggesting that the Prophet was born on the 2nd, 8th, or 10th of Rabi al-Awwal, the assertion that he was born on the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal appears to be less substantiated compared to these other dates. This is because the latter dates are supported by direct descendants of the Prophet, whereas the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal is primarily cited by Ibn Ishaq, who lived approximately 200 years after the Prophet's birth and did not provide a chain of narrators for his information. So why has the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal become the most widely accepted date, to the extent that it might be considered audacious to challenge this historical fact? The answer lies in two main factors. First, Ibn Ishaq's work has been heavily referenced and summarized by later scholars, creating a dominant narrative that emphasizes the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal without further scrutiny. This reliance on Ibn Ishaq's account has perpetuated its prominence. Second, the establishment of the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal as a public celebration date significantly contributed to its widespread acceptance. The first recorded instance of celebrating the Prophet's birthday publicly occurred around 517 Hijri, during the Fatimid dynasty in Egypt. prior to this, the commemoration of birthdays was not a common practice among Muslims, as celebrating birthdays was not a tradition in pre-Islamic Arab culture. The concept of recording and celebrating birthdays is a relatively modern Western practice. The Fatimids, who were an Ismaili Shia dynasty, instituted numerous public festivals as part of their rule over Egypt. They celebrated various events, including the birthdays of imams, and established the commemoration of the Prophet Muhammad's birthday on the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal. This practice quickly gained popularity and spread beyond Egypt. Sunni rulers later adopted this tradition, importing it to regions such as Mosul in Iraq. The 12th of Rabi al-Awwal became widely accepted due to the influence of historical texts, such as those by Ibn Ishaq, and the adoption of this date for public celebrations by the Fatimids. The practice subsequently spread to other regions, solidifying its place in Islamic tradition despite the existence of other plausible dates. The first Sunni governor to commemorate the Mawlid was not the earliest, but around 670 Hijri marked a notable shift. Prior to this, the celebration of the Prophet Muhammad's birthday was virtually unknown in the Muslim world. This commemoration, held on the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal, evolved into an elaborate festival. Various rulers began competing to host the most grandiose event, providing free food, bread, and gifts. This practice quickly became a major public event. From around 660 Hijri, the celebration of the Prophet's birthday began spreading in Sunni regions. Initially, some scholars opposed the practice, while others accepted it under specific conditions. Over time, public pressure led to its widespread acceptance. The practice of celebrating the Mawlid on the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal became ingrained in public consciousness. Despite academic arguments that other dates, such as the 2nd, 8th, or 10th of Rabi al-Awwal, may be more historically accurate, the 12th remains the most widely recognized date due to its association with early public celebrations. Additionally, a narration from a source who died in 95 Hijri suggests that the Prophet was born around noon. Although there is a temporal gap in this account, it is considered acceptable due to its early provenance. This narration symbolically aligns the Prophet's birth with the sun's peak brightness, representing the illumination of divine guidance. Regarding legends about the Prophet's birth, many accounts lack academic credibility. Early sources offer limited information, while later texts contain increasingly elaborate and often embellished details. This disparity suggests the introduction of numerous legends over time. For example, some narratives claim the Prophet was born already circumcised or that he fell into prostration immediately upon birth. Such reports, while intriguing, often lack solid evidence and are more reflective of legend than fact. It is important to rely on genuine historical accounts rather than fabricating stories to honor the Prophet. We do not need to resort to fictional embellishments to honor the Prophet Muhammad, as such fabrications undermine the dignity of our religion. The Prophet's excellence stands on its own merits, and there is no need to invent additional details. The Prophet is universally recognized as the greatest of human beings, and the established facts are sufficient to demonstrate his significance. We should also addressing several claims that lack authenticity. For instance, there are unverified reports suggesting that pagan temples fell in other regions. These claims are not supported by historical evidence and are not considered credible. Additionally, Ibn Ishaq notes that the Prophet was circumcised on the 7th day after his birth. However, later sources written centuries afterward claim that he was born uncircumcised. The earlier accounts confirm that his grandfather performed the circumcision and held a celebratory feast. His grandfather chose the name Mohammed, which was uncommon at the time. Some scholars argue that while the name was known, it was rare, as evidenced by a few historical figures. When asked about the unusual name, Abdul-Muttalib, the Prophet's grandfather, expressed his desire for his son to be praised both on earth and in the heavens, reflecting the name's meaning of the praised one. Early sources, such as those by Ibn Ishaq, do not include these later invented details. It is noteworthy that subsequent texts from the 700s and 800s Hijri contain elaborate and speculative additions. For example, some later works provide extensive descriptions that prompt questions about their authenticity. Only one authentic hadith describes the Prophet's birth, found in Musnad Ahmed. In this hadith, the Prophet recounts his own birth, mentioning that his mother saw a light emanating from her, reaching as far as the city of Basra in Syria. This account, attributed directly to the prophet, is more reliable compared to other, less substantiated legends. Basra, located in the southern part of what is now Syria, was illuminated by this light, symbolizing the arrival of a significant figure. The reference to Syria, or Sham, highlights its historical and spiritual importance. It is important to recognize that the historical region of Sham encompasses modern-day Jordan and Palestine as well as Syria. The light described in the hadith signifies the forthcoming influence of Islam. Historically, Sham was a crucial region for the Byzantine Empire, and its subsequent conquest by Islam marked a significant transformation. Damascus, once a prominent center of Roman civilization, became an important part of the Arab world following the advent of Islam. The early Islamic conquest of Syria illustrates the profound impact of Islam on the region. As Muslims, we believe that the awaited figure, Jesus, will descend in Sham, Syria, rather than in Mecca or Medina. This belief is rooted in the fact that Sham was consecrated by the Prophet's ancestors, the children of Israel. Consequently, Sham holds significant symbolic importance. Some scholars suggest that the prohibition on jinn accessing the heavens began at the Prophet's birth. This belief is based on the idea that jinn, once allowed to overhear celestial conversations, were subsequently barred. However, the more accurate view is that this restriction occurred not at the Prophet's birth but when he began his prophethood at the age of 40. Hadith corroborates this, indicating that the heavens were closed at the commencement of revelation, which led to the jinn's bewilderment. The Quran recounts how some jinn, upon hearing the Quran, converted to Islam. Upon the Prophet's birth, the news quickly spread among the Quraysh. Abu Lahab, an uncle who would later oppose the Prophet, was initially supportive. Hearing of the Prophet's birth, Abu Lahab freed his slave girl, Thuwayba, out of joy. This act demonstrated his happiness at the news. There is a hadith recorded in Musnad Ahmad that we should consider. The hadith narrates an incident involving Abbas, who saw Abu Lahab in a dream after his death. In the dream, Abbas observed Abu Lahab undergoing severe punishment. Abbas inquired of Abu Lahab whether his kinship with the Prophet had benefited him in any way. Abu Lahab replied that it had not, except for one minor concession. He mentioned that, upon hearing the news of the Prophet's birth, he had freed his slave girl, Thuwayba. As a result of this act, he was granted a small reprieve, symbolized by a few drops of water. This reprieve was the only mercy granted to him because of the good deed he performed at the time of the Prophet's birth. The act of freeing Thuwayba was a significant gesture, reflecting his joy at the Prophet's arrival.